Hey, it's Slay, and I know I said that this wasn't really going to be a movie review channel, but all I do in my spare time is watch movies, so that's all I really have an opinion about right now. I wanted to do a video about a movie called Backcountry, and I wanted to compare it to Jaws, because it's been compared to Jaws quite a bit, and I actually haven't watched Jaws, so I figure I should probably do that first, and I'm having a really hard time getting my hands on it, so I wanted to do this one instead, I guess, for my entire will to live finally left me. So the movie I wanted to talk about is called, or it was called, Seven Sisters. It's called something different. Different countries, I suppose. I don't know why. I know why some movie productions do that, but this was made by Netflix, so you'd think that they would just be like, no, this is what we're calling it. So it's either Seven Sisters or it's What Happened to Monday, which will make sense once I start talking about it. And I definitely did not pick this dress because it's kind of like what they wear in the movie. So the biggest, well, mostly the thing that I want to talk about is the problems with the world building in the movie. There are a lot of questions that arise when different elements are introduced, and then they give you little tidbits of what's supposed to explain why things are the way they are, but really it just leaves some more questions if you think about it too hard, which I did. So one, I'm not entirely sure how old the protagonists in the film are. I'm assuming at least 25 because look at me. So I should probably go over what the world is trying to do in the first place. It starts out with a news or like documentary narration talking about how the world got overpopulated, so they need more food, so they made better food, but then the food that they made everybody have more babies, and the population got out of control, and then they had to make the, rule of one child per family. And the conflict in the whole thing arises because the father of their mother, who died during childbirth, decided to hide all 7 of the children that she had from the government. So assuming that all 7 of them, because they're identical twins, are around or at least 25 and the law's already been implemented, we're thrown into a world that's gray and completely like full of armed checkpoints and military men with guns around every fucking corner, and it looks like a shithole. It looks like Fallout. What isn't entirely clear, and what happens, or at least what the what everyone's told happens if there is more than one child per birth, is that the other one is cryogenically frozen and you can never see them again, but someday we're going to have enough resources to support them and everything will be fine and they'll come back even though you won't be around anymore. It's just a happy little stasis, and they'll have another chance, don't worry. The question is that if this rule has been implemented for so long, and it is active in the entire world, or society at least, what you're assuming this is kind of the fallout of First World, but it must be affecting everything, is that why is that level of enforcement and security still necessary? By this point, you would think we had everything down and under control, but I guess not, because as soon as you start having that question, like, why are there so many military men around, they try to answer it by throwing in a mom. And she's getting one of her children taken away, they're screaming in a crowd, and they pull away the little girl, but she gets to keep the little boy because that's the rule and it's fine. So they do that within the first 5 minutes. Like, you see the world that it's become, you see the mother getting her child taken away. And this doesn't answer the questions that I have for several reasons. One, because somehow the kid that's getting taken away is at least 10 years old. The protagonists, even though it's not really elaborated, had a grandfather with lots of resources. He was really high up in society or something. He had the ability and smarts to be able to hide them from the world with a secret room and little bracelets that he synchronized so that everybody, every time they're scanned, because one of them gets to go out every day, they'll still think that they are the same person. So how did this mother hide the child not only for 10 years, but in a society so strict that you have military men running around with guns constantly enforcing this? How did she hide the pregnancy in the first place? How did she manage to feed more than one child? You'd think with all of that effort and resources going into things, they'd at least keep track of how much food you're eating and everything like that, but no. And I guess the protagonists that need to share one woman's wages worth of food among 7 of them, They're all relatively healthy, and she's just able to buy an actual, like, sized duck every night and share it, and everybody expects, no, that's fine. She's just eating that all by herself. Don't worry about it. The second thing that didn't really make sense about that mother getting her child taken away is that the child was a girl, and the other child she had was a boy. They didn't exactly look the same age, so either one, she had 2 singular childbirths, which is unnatural in this situation, or she already had one of the other kids taken away. And they also didn't explain whether it's more common to get identical or, the non-identical births. Like, are multiple eggs dropping, or is one egg cell just splitting a lot? The second thing that doesn't work for explaining this whole militarized situation is that everyone in the crowd seeing the mother getting the child taken away is fucking pissed. Like, they are so mad. They're throwing bottles at the cops. They're screaming, they're yelling, they want to help the lady out. And I thought we lived in a society where this was generally accepted. Like, this is just what happens. Sure, it's a little uncomfortable and you're not super happy about it, but everyone at this point has had this, they've been influenced by this in some way, shape, or form. The hierarchy they're trying to make doesn't really make a whole lot of cohesive sense. Because at this point, if everybody hated it that much, then there would be a revolution. But at the same time, it's supposed to be generally accepted. It's just, like, heavily enforced. But if it's heavily enforced but not generally accepted, then you don't really get the people that are enforcing it doing it very well or happily, and then things don't work out. The whole thing that makes dystopias work is that the protagonist might be against it, or, like, they see some fatal flaw in it before everybody else does, but the general masses and population have to be on board. Or it just doesn't make any sense. They went really heavy on the they have to fight the system, not the people thing, and that doesn't actually make sense for real people or to keep it in any way realistic for how this kind of thing happens. So the third thing with that scene is what I mentioned before, is that the checkpoint system and the fact that they need to have a bracelet, like everybody needs a bracelet that says who they are, that they're a single child, and they get ID'd every time they go somewhere. Feels like just a device to put fear into the protagonist. It doesn't feel like it inhibits the protagonist from doing whatever they want, but it doesn't function on a societal level because nobody else has the technology to be able to hotwire it like that. Like, this was like a 1 in billionths situation, and that's why they're the protagonist, and that's why all of this is happening. So the reason all of this militarized force and authority is being constantly pushed into the scenes and developing the world doesn't make sense on the standard level. Because although we're supposed to believe that lady hid that kid for 10 years, it doesn't make sense. Like, that's really a thing that happens every other day. Also, with all this technology, like I was going on about resources before, if resources are so scarce, why weren't they monitoring the amount of water going into their apartment? Are they all just, like, stinky and gross? But no, they're not. They're living well, each of them, and they all have their own different things and styles and possessions. So another plot device that they tried to throw in to make other things make more sense or more coherent was the one girl, when she was younger, lost the tip of her finger while skateboarding. I don't know how you do it either. How do you lose the entire tip of your finger while skateboarding? I don't know. The whole point of that was to exemplify the kind of sharing and the responsibility they have to have to one another for the single persona, so the grandfather had to cut all the tips of their fingers off so they look exactly the same. It was also just kind of a funny little tie-in for them to have one of them take the tip of a finger of one of the enforcement people on the end of hers so she could use his gun, because for whatever reason their fingerprint locked, because this world is so high-tech and yet so dumb. So it was a funny little tie-in, but it's not super appreciated. So slowly, once you take these things into consideration, you realize that they're building a society or a dystopia that is more or less meant to just be the opposition. This is the bad guy. It's the bad guy doing bad things because they do bad things. For example, when a couple guys, they come to capture the girls in the first place, they go into the apartment building, and when the doorman sees them, he stands up for 1 second like, "Hey, who are you?" and they immediately shoot him in the forehead. What did that guy do? He doesn't know anything. You're just needlessly killing someone for the sake of killing someone because you're the bad guy. That has absolutely no plot relevance. You could have walked into the building a bit less conspicuously if you didn't want him to catch on that something was going down. And then once they take out those guys, there's a long expanse of them not being interrupted. Several of them leave the apartment building to go on other escapades before they're tracked down. And then once one of them is tracked down on the outside, there are just swats and swats of teams that come to get her. And it's like, if you had this much resources and this many people going after them at this point, why weren't they surrounding the building from the start? How did you let out a couple of them if it was so important that this didn't get out in the first place? Why'd you send 3 guys that got taken down and then just let them go off on adventures? So the actual competence of the humans that they use to enforce the society that the protagonists are fighting is ridiculous. So not trying to pick apart any more of the logic of the things that happen in the show or the plot holes, the many plot holes, because it was kind of enjoyable to watch, honestly, was that I was really inspired by the main antagonist, who is the leader of this new society. She is kind of like President Snow. I don't have a whole repertoire, he's just the first thing that comes to mind. So the antagonist says, to hell with it, to hell with everybody, humans will never learn. And that's fairly strong, because she's doing everything in her power to make a world that can survive and function. And the necessary actions that really did have to be taken was killing all the firstborn children. What I didn't like was that although it gives her a more human aspect, they turned her into a hypocrite because she had children and she's hiding identical twins from the world in a top secret laboratory, which is the same place that they burn all of the rest of them. Just taking that out. Anyway, just the idea of this world is what I want to talk about. The necessity that we could potentially have, and the strides and sacrifices that have to be made for the survival of the human race is basically what's being put out there. We're not happy about it, but can we do this? The answer is supposedly no. But also was like a little interesting bit of the hypocrisy of the leader herself, and not the system, I suppose. Just going to add this in here, is that she was trying to make it so that you could have multiple children as long as you could literally prove financial stability and provide the emotional well-being that more than one child would need in a household. And that's parenting law. I personally love, and I think that that should be implemented in our current society just in general. I'm not saying we have to kill all the firstborns, but we should monitor the kinds of families that we're allowing to be built. So she's trying to set it up that after these laws are passed, it'll be okay for her to have several children because she is well off and everything is fine. And the reason Monday, the one that is in cahoots with her and gave away the whereabouts of all the rest of her sisters for what isn't really a good explanation, but it's because she's pregnant and she's going to have more than one kid. So she needs to get on the side of the president needs to enforce the law, and then she can have children. She's just going to give up the entirety of the family she's always had and loved, even though she's really bitter about it, for the unborn children that she has. But because this is a dystopia and the protagonists are generally against what's going on, the entirety of it and the fact that they are not doing what they said they were doing and burning children alive instead of freezing them led to them being exposed, and the entire system was brought down, and now they don't know what they're doing. All they know is that Monday died, and now they're preserving both of the children to live. So the movie starts and ends news broadcast talking about how things ended up the way they are. The one that bookends the movie explains that parents that were hiding their children are coming out of hiding, families are brought back together, it's freedom, it's loveliness, but there's also this weird foreboding because everyone's sitting here like, okay, But what do we do now? We still don't have a solution for the problem that we have. Everyone's still having too many babies. We don't have enough food to provide for them. And the food that we do have is making more babies. So it's just a never-ending cycle of badness, and they have absolutely no solution except for the one that worked for about, like, 3 decades of population control. And the actual end scene is them zooming out of the nursery or lab, whatever you want to call it, that is housing Monday's fetus so that they can someday grow up and be children and live with their aunts. And then there's babies everywhere, like all over. It's just rows and rows of babies, and they start screaming. Now, this was a protagonist overcoming society kind of film, but it ends on complete, like, tragedy. Actually, because there is no solution. There is no happy ending. You've seen the rest of the world so far. Yeah, they're not putting resources into the military anymore to enforce. They have a bit more money to put into solutions, but they still don't have a solution. And everything's just going to get worse. All of that gray, bleak dust and falling apart buildings and all the litter everywhere and people not being able to eat very well, it's still happening. So the reason I wanted to make this was because I watched this and I watched a movie called The Circle, the one with Emma Watson, and I'll probably do a video on that one later too, but both of them had me feeling like the actual journey of the movie and the end of the movie, or what's actually taken away, is that things didn't get fixed, and that's not really the point of a hero's journey or how these things are supposed to go. We're making dystopias just to make dystopias. We're making bad guys just to be bad guys. But the whole point of dystopias and what made them great was that it looked good from the outside until you went too far on the inside and there was a problem that had to be solved, and we work towards that, and it's really fulfilling in the end because everything gets fixed. But now we're just sitting here at the end and everything's terrible, and I really don't think that's what they were going for. That's just what I got out of it, though. If you've watched it, which I don't think many people have, it wasn't highly advertised, and it's a bit hard to find now for some reason. You have to go on other, like, countries to find it. I can't have it on Canadian servers right now for some reason. But if you watched it, let me know how you feel about it, the message that you got from it, because overall I just feel like we got told that humans are dumb, we fuck ourselves over all the time, and that's all we're ever going to continue to do, and there's no way out. So that's pretty happy. If you liked this commentary, which you probably didn't because it was depressing, also give it a like and subscribe or whatever, and I'll try to do another one sometime soon. Not likely, but bye. Thanks for watching.